أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله والصلاة والسلام على إمام القبلتين ونبي الحرمين وأفضل الثقلين وجد الحسن والحسين الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الصادقين والذين ذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا اللهم صل وسلم وزد وبارك على صاحب الدعوة النبوية والسولة الحيدرية والعصمة الفاطمية والحلم الحسنية والشجاعة الحسينية والعبادة السجادية والمآثر الباقرية والآثار الجعفرية والعلوم الكاذمية والحجج الردبية والجود التقوية والنقاوة النقبية والحيبة العسكرية والغيبة الإلهية اللهم عجل فرجه وسهل مخرجه أما بعد فقد قال الله في كتابه الكريم بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أم حسبت أن أصحاب الكهف والرقيم كانوا من آياتنا عجبا صلوا على محمد For the love of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. For the love of Fatima al-Zahra, salamullahi alayha, a second salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. For the hastening of the reappearance of the master of our time, a third salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Indeed, one of the most famous incidents recorded in history of the movement of the caravan of Ahlul Bayt from Karbala towards Sham is that moment when the head of Sayyid al-Shuhada began to recite the Quran. It's stated that the head of the Imam would recite chapter 18, verse 9, Am hasibta anna ashab al-kahfi وَالرَّقِيمِ كَانُوا مِنْ آيَاتِنَا عَجَبًا. That the head of the Imam would say, that do you suppose that the people of the cave in the inscription are from amongst our astonishing signs? Now, of course, this incident in history, it occurred at a time when as the women of Ali Muhammad were being taken through the marketplaces, you find the heads of the shuhada would be in front of the women. So at that point, the eyes and the gazes of the onlookers would go upon the women of Ali Muhammad. So the head of Sayyid al-Shuhada began to recite the Quran. Now the question arises that why did the head of the Imam recite these verses? You find the answers are numerous. From the first angle, it was to divert the attention that as the people would look towards the women of Ali Muhammad, they would see this miraculous reality that the cut head of the Imam was reciting the Quran. So the gazes, instead of going towards the women of Ali Muhammad, would go towards the head of the Imam. But the second reason why the Imam, he would recite the Quran is that the Imam, he goes to show that I am the son of Ali ibn Abi Talib. That within this time period, you are following a man whose father on the day of Siffin, he put the Quran upon a spear. But my reality is such that even when my head is upon a spear, I am reciting the Quran. That this is the son of that man whom upon the day of Ghadir, when Rasulullah, he raised the hand of Amir al-Mu'mineen, he recited Hadith al-Thaqalain upon that day as well. He said, Inni tarikun fikum al-Thaqalain. Kitab Allah wa itrati ahl bayti. And you know how Rasulullah, he did that on the day of Ghadir. It stated that the Prophet of God, when he would say, I leave behind Quran and Ahlul Bayt, the fingers of the Prophet were these two fingers. They weren't these fingers. You know, they said to the sixth Imam that, O Ja'far as-Sadiq, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. They say, O Ja'far as-Sadiq, you state that upon the day of Ghadir, when your grandfather said, Inni tarikun fikum al-Thaqalain, the fingers he used were two sababas. You find in Arabic, each of the fingers has a name. This is sababa, this is wusta. He asked the Imam that why was it these two fingers? The Imam, he says, when you look at these fingers, you find one is larger than the other. When Rasulullah said, I leave behind Quran and Ahlul Bayt, he used those two fingers which were equal in size. That Sayyid al-Shuhada time and time again would remind of this reality. But you find the third reason why the head of the Imam would recite this verse is because the incident of Ashabul Kahf has a relation towards the movement of Sayyid al-Shuhada. That when the head of the Imam recites chapter 18, verse 9, it is not out of random, it's not arbitrarily that the Imam would recite this verse. The fact is that there must be some similarities between the movement of Ashabul Kahf, the people of the cave, and Sayyid al-Shuhada. You find within that time period, these people of the cave, they lived in a time where there was a tyrannical ruler who was changing the deen. So they made a movement in the name of the preservation of the deen. Sayyid al-Shuhada is going to show in this time period there is also a tyrannical ruler. But there is a difference between my movement and their movement. Their movement was to save their iman. My movement is to save the iman of this entire ummah, the entire nation of my grandfather. You find this reality, it exists. You know, tonight the subject is analyzing the movement of Ashabul Kahf so we can understand the movement of Sayyid al-Shuhada. You find when you look at this chapter, the 18th chapter of the Quran, this entire chapter is about preserving one's iman in Akhirul Zaman, in the end of times. You know, the tradition of Rasulullah would state that the one who wants to protect himself from the afflictions of the Dajjal, he should hold on to the recitation of Suratul Kahf. You find this chapter has an immense linking with the movement of Imam al-Zaman Ajjalallahu Ta'ala Farajahu Sharif. And the movement of the 12th Imam is none other than a continuation of the movement of Sayyid al-Shuhada. You know, doesn't that tradition state, one of the most authentic traditions that we have, that when Rayhan ibn Shabib, he sees Imam al-Rida upon the day of the first of Muharram, Imam al-Rida, he says towards Yamna Shabib, O Yamna Shabib, that why are you not mourning? Yamna Shabib, he says, oh my master, why are you mourning in this way? The Imam says, O Yamna Shabib, do you not know that it is the first of Muharram? The Imam, he says, Yabna Shabib, in kunta baqiyan li shay'in fabki lil Husayn ibn Ali. He says, O son of Shabib, if you ever want to cry, whatever it may be, whether it's your broken heart, whether it's problems in your own personal life, O son of Shabib, cry over my grandfather Hussein. Then he says, فَإِنَّهُ ذُبِحَ كَمَا يُذْبَحُ الْكَبْشِ. For my grandfather was slaughtered in the way that they slaughter a sheep. Then the Imam says, وَقُتِلَ مَعَهُ ثَمَانِيَةَ عَشَرَ رَجُلًا مِنْ أَهْلِ بَيْتِهِ مَا لَهُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ شَبِيهُونَ. He says from his family, there were 18 people who were killed, the likes of which this planet has not seen. Then he says, O Yamna Shabib, do you not know that 4,000 angels, they descended upon my grandfather. When they descended, they found that my grandfather was killed. So they stayed at that spot where his body it rests, and until the rising of the Imam, they are mourning at that spot. You find from this tradition, we understand two things. The first thing we understand is that the malaika and the angels are those creation of Allah which were created for ubudiyah. If the angels are coming from alam malakut to alam mulk to cry over Sayyid al-Shuhada, it goes to show that crying over Hussein is an act of ibadah without shak within it. But the second reality is that this tradition, it shows the link between the movement of our 12th Imam and the movement of Sayyid al-Shuhada. Now when Surah Al-Kahf is a chapter which is linked with the 12th Imam, you find it's also linked with Imam al-Hussein. That who is Ashabul Kahf? What can we learn from these individuals? You find whenever you have a Quranic analysis, the goal of that Quranic analysis is to find how those stories and incidents, they apply within your life in the 21st century. You know, I'll give you an example. If I told you Prophet Hud, you would say that what occurs in your mind is that there was a prophet and his society, they built homes upon the mountain, but because they didn't have iman in Allah, they were destroyed. But if I rephrase it in a different manner, and if I tell you this incident in the Quran is about a group of people that despite the technological advancements of their society, there was a moral decay within that society, you'll say that this story is something which is much more relatable towards us within today's time period. But you find reflection is that key. When you look at the story of Ashabul Kahf, you find you understand a number of realities. You understand the role of the youth. You understand the concept of hijrah and migration. You understand what it means to preserve your iman in a society which is devoid of iman and faith. You know, Ashabul Kahf, they lived in the end of the Roman Empire in modern day Turkey. The king of that time, his name was Daqyanus. You know, even in Urdu, when something is of an old mindset, you use the word Daqyanusi in Urdu. You find the source of that word comes from this king who was in that time period. This king was a tyrannical king who declared himself to be God. Those individuals, Ashabul Kahf, they were from the Al-Muwahidun, those who followed the deen of Nabi Isa, that they held on to the religion of Nabi Isa. But you find that Imam as-Sadiq, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, Imam as-Sadiq would say that these individuals, they had a great position in front of the king, but they left that position to preserve their iman. They made their way towards the cave. You find we understand two lessons from this beginning portion of the incident. The first lesson that we understand is that even if you have to make a hijrah and a migration to preserve your iman, you make a hijrah. Now a hijrah and a migration is of two types. One is a dhahiri and an outward migration. One is an inward and an internal migration. You know, when Mullah Sadra, he would write about the life of man, he would say man has 4 journeys within his life. He would write his famous works, Al-Asfarul Arba'a. He says the first journey within the life of man is from min al-khalq ila al-haq. That the first journey you make is that, O human being, you were created upon this earth. But make yourself at such a level that you drown yourself in that reality of the truth, that reality of Allah. The second journey is fil haq bil haq. That, oh man, at that point, what your goal is to actualize the hadith, تَخَلَّقُوا بِأَخْلَاقِ اللَّهِ. That act in the mannerisms of Allah to reflect the asma and the names of Allah. You see, those who reflected the names of Allah at the maximum capacity of an insan and a human being was Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. You know, they said to Imam Muhammad al-Baqir salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, they said, "O Imam al-Baqir, that when you look at the story of Sulaiman, and Sulaiman, he says towards his people, that who can bring me the throne of Bilqis? One of the jinns, قَالَ إِفْرِيتٌ مِّنَ الْجِنِّ. He said that I can bring that throne before you stand up. But it stated that there was a man who had ilmun min al-kitab, that he had knowledge from the book. He didn't have the knowledge of the entire book. He said that I can bring that throne before the blink of an eye. They said to Imam Muhammad al-Baqir that this man Asif bin Barkhia, why is it that he brought the throne? That could Sulaiman not bring the throne? You find Imam Muhammad al-Baqir, he says that Nabi Sulaiman could have brought the throne, but he wanted his ummah to understand the status of his wasi and his successor. When people say, could Rasulullah not lift the door of Khaybar? You find the reality is the Prophet has the ability. But you find Rasulullah wanted his ummah to understand the status of his wasi and his successor. But the tradition, it continues. The fifth Imam, he says that the Asma'ul A'dam are 73 in totality. Nabi Sulaiman's successor Asif only had 1 out of 73 of those Asma'ul A'dam. That with 1 out of those 73, he was able to bring that throne from across the world. Then the Imam says Isa had 2 out of 73. Then after that, he gives the list of the Anbiya. For example, he says Adam had 24 out of the 73. But he says us Ahlul Bayt have 72 out of the 73 Asma'ul A'dam. That these are those individuals. They manifested the attributes of Allah upon this earth. That they made that journey within Haqq. But you find once you made this journey in the attributes of Allah, the next journey is min al-haq ila al-khalq bil-haq. That you don't stop at that level. You have a responsibility towards the creation who is around you. You know, in one of the battles, it was the day of Safin, a man comes up to Amir al-Mu'mineen, he was a munafiq. He says, Ya Ali, what is Islam? Now somebody asks you, what is Islam? We start a 2-3 hour discourse. The Imam, he gives them an answer in 1 line. He says, it's very simple. Islam is huququllah wa huququl abd. That's what Islam is. It is the rights of Allah and the rights of the creation of Allah. If you fulfill both of these, then you are upon the path of Islam and submission. Then the 4th journey is within the creation, O human being. That once you have this connection with the divine, one hadith it states, a mu'min will not be able to elevate into the next level of iman unless he takes another believer with him. That a mu'min is a person who elevates those who are around him. You find this is an example of an internal journey. That Ashabul Kahf, they're making a journey. And you find this entire chapter is about spiritual wayfaring. That everyone within this chapter, you know, in this chapter there are 3 stories. Number 1 is Musa and Khidr. The second is Ashabul Kahf. The third is Dhul Qarnayn. Dhul Qarnayn, he makes a journey from the east to the west. Ashabul Kahf, they make a journey. Musa, he makes a journey to find that alim who has ilmul ladunni. That alim who has ilm from Allah, from the direct presence of Allah. You find journeying is that reality. But the second lesson we take from Ashabul Kahf in the beginning is that we find out that those who are upon the path of Haqq will always be in the minority. Those upon the path of haqq will always be in the minority. Why is that? Because when you have principles and you hold on to those principles, you are not able to do whatever it takes to benefit yourself. Your responsibility is towards those principles that you hold on to. You know, Ibn Abbas, he goes towards Amir al-Mu'mineen. You know, after the Imam, he becomes the Khalifa. You find the Imam, he gives a sermon. He says, anyone who served in the illegitimate regimes before me, I will remove them. And anyone who is a ghasib, anyone who has usurped money from the Baytul Mal, I will take that money back to the extent that if your fathers paid the dowries of your mothers with the money from the Baytul Mal, I will take that back. After that, Amir al-Mu'mineen, he begins to de-appoint all of the governors from the previous regimes who were people of falsehood. When he de-appointed Muawiyah, Ibn Abbas, he says, Ya Ali, that if you keep Muawiyah, it will be better for the stability of the Muslim Ummah. Amir al-Mu'mineen, he says, O Ibn Abbas, that may be the case, but at the same time, I am bound towards the truth and haqq, that I cannot let a man like that serve within my rulership. That you find those who are in the minority, they have principles that they hold on to. You know, it's stated in the time period of the 6th Imam. A man comes to the Imam. He says, oh Imam, you have followers. Why don't you have an uprising? The Imam, he says, I have followers. He says to the man, do you see that oven? Go and sit within that oven. That man, he says, oh Imam, I'm your follower. I'm your lover. Why are you telling me to do this? History, it says, at that point, a man by the name of Harun al-Makki was walking by. The Imam, he says, oh Harun al-Makki, go and sit within the oven. Harun al-Makki, without asking any questions, he goes, he sits in the oven, the door gets closed. The other man, he begins to worry. He says, oh Imam, he was your follower. This is what you did towards him. Imam as-Sadiq says, open the door towards the oven. When he opens the door towards the oven, he sees Harun al-Makki sitting inside. Nothing had happened towards him. You find that those who have this principle and this level of faith are those in the minority. You know, the Quran, it says, these individuals, they make their migration. When they go towards the cave, Daqyanus, the ruler, he sends people to go find them. But amongst the group that were finding them, one of them was a believer. He saw that they were within the cave. So he closed the cave and he wrote an inscription with their names upon it, according to many of the mufassirin. You know, when the verse, it says, Am hasibta anna ashab al-kafi war-rakimi. That what is this word rakim? You know, you find even in modern Arabic, the word markoom, it means something which is written down, something which is accounted. You know, I'll give you another verse from the Quran which uses this word rakam and its derivatives. There's a verse of the Quran that says, Kalla, inna kitab al-abrari lafi illiyin, wama adraka ma illiyun. Yashhaduhu, it says what? It says, La yashhaduhu illa al-mukarrabun. It says the book of the abrar, the books of the righteous people. You know, in the Quran, there are three groups. There is Ashabul Yameen. There's Ashabul Shamal or Mash'ama and Maymana, the people of the right hand, the people of the left hand. But you find the third group are the honorable people, the abrar, those who are muqarrab towards Allah. It's stated that the abrar are those whose books are within the illiyin, in that highest reality. And these individuals, they have the ability to witness the deeds of other people. You know, when our traditions state that our deeds are presented to the Imam of the time on Laylatul Jum'ah, you find these concepts are proven through Quranic commentary and Quranic analysis. That these are those individuals that had al-ilmul huduri due to the purity of their soul. You find knowledges of two types. You find one is al-ilmul husuli, and the discussion might be difficult, but I think you're up for it. The discussion, it says that the first type of knowledge is that knowledge which you acquire through the median of your senses. When you see something or you hear something, you find this is a knowledge which you acquire. That there is a concept in your mind, and through that concept you gain that knowledge. But you find that there is a type of knowledge that due to the taharat of somebody's nafs, due to the purity of the soul, a person is able to get that knowledge directly. That person with basira and insight. You know, when our fourth Imam, he says about Sayyida Zainab, Anti bihamdillah, alimatun ghayru mu'allama. The Imam, he says, oh my aunt, you by the praise of Allah are that alima whom nobody taught you. This is a line which shows the status of Sayyida Zainab as an abidah, as that servant of Allah, that her soul was so pure when it came to the acquisition of knowledge, she didn't need a teacher. That is that understanding and ma'rifat of Allah that she had. You find this is that reality. The Quran, it says that they are able to see that book of deeds, the word rakam, something which is marqum. So you find this Ashabul Kahf, they go towards the cave. When they go towards the cave, the Quran, it says, وَنَحْنُ نَقُصُّ عَلَيْكَ نَبَأَهُمْ بِالْحَقِّ إِنَّهُمْ فِتْيَةٌ آمَنُوا بِرَبِّهِمْ وَزِدْنَاهُمْ هُدًى وَرَبَطْنَا عَلَىٰ قُلُوبِهِمْ. The Quran, it says that when they went towards the cave, we narrate their story with the truth. And they go towards the cave and they pray towards their Lord, so we increase them in guidance. And we fortified and strengthened their hearts. That the next reality from this incident that you find is that when one moves in the path of Allah, Allah, He strengthens the hearts of those individuals. That doesn't that Hadith al-Qudsi it state? One Hadith al-Qudsi, it says, Man taqarraba ilayya shibran, taqarrabtu ilayha dhira'an. You know, what is the difference between shibr and dhira? You find when you look at the Arabic lexicons, shibr is that length of your hand at its normal extension from the thumb towards the pinky. A dhira is from your elbow to the end of your fingers. The one who moves this close towards me, I move this close towards them. You know, our fifth Imam has a tradition. If you want to understand the hearts of those who move in the ways of Allah, our fifth Imam, he has a tradition. The Imam, he says that the shohada upon the day of Ashura, when the arrows would go in towards their bodies, they wouldn't feel any pain. Now, what does this tradition mean? Does it mean that they're not human beings, that they don't have pain receptors, or is there a different explanation? You know, every hadith, you look at it through the angle of the Quran. You know, within the Quran, when the women of Egypt, they began to speak ill of Zulaykha, that Zulaykha was embodied and was embezzled by the beauty of Yusuf. You find it stated that Zulaykha, she became tired of these accusations. So she called all of the women of Egypt. In front of those women, she placed fruits, she placed knives. And then as they were cutting the fruit, she called out Yusuf. When Yusuf came out, it says, the Quran says, فَقْطَ أَيْدِيَهُنَّ, that they began to cut their hands, but they didn't realize they were cutting their hands. Why? Because they were absorbed and mesmerized by the beauty of Yusuf. When this hadith, it says the shohada didn't feel any pain on the day of Ashura. It was that they were so mesmerized by the beauty of Sayyid al-Shohada.
and the beauty of the message of Hussein and the Lord of Hussein. That whatever challenges they faced, they didn't feel those challenges. That they were in such a state of irfan and recognition of their Creator. This is that reality. You find that these are those Ashabul Kahf, that Allah, He says He fortified their hearts. You know, now the Quran, it speaks about when they were in the cave. It says that they were in the cave 309 years. And you know, the Quran, it says that this cave, it would face the northward direction. When the sun would rise, the rays of the sun would slant to the right. And when the sun would set, the rays, they would slant to the left. And they would be within the middle. You know, the Quran, it goes to show that if you're in the area for 309 years, and the sun is shining directly upon your body is going to decompose. So the ayat, they give a very vivid description. And then after that, it says, وَتَحْسَبُهُمْ أَيْقَادًا وَهُمْ رُقُودٌ. If you looked at them, you would think that they were awake, but in reality, they are sleeping. Why? Because anyone would come to the entrance of the cave, they would find that their eyes were open, their dog would be laying in front of them. Then the Quran, it says, وَنُقَلِّبُهُمْ دَاتَ الْيَمِينِ وَدَاتَ الشِّمَالِ. We would turn their bodies to the right, and we would turn their bodies to the left. That if you're sleeping for that many years and your blood, it is accumulated in one place, you find that this would be something which is detrimental to the body. So their bodies, they had circulation. Then after that, it says, وَقَلْبُهُمْ بَاسِطٌ ذِرَاعَيْهِ بِالْوَسِيدِ. And their dog would lay in front of him with his arms, with his paws, forearms stretched. You know, there's an interesting historical incident with this ayat. It's stated when Nasiruddin Tusi was being buried. Now, who is Nasiruddin Tusi? You know, even upon the moon, there is a crater called the Tusi crater. Many of the followers of Ahlul Bayt, they don't know this, that even upon the moon, NASA, they named a crater after Nasiruddin Tusi, who was a Shia Itna Ashari alim. That when you go to a trigonometry classroom, and today you see the 6 functions, cosine, tangent, etc. towards the end of them, you find these 6 functions were the contributions of Nasiruddin Tusi, a Shia alim. That you find there was not a subject within the sciences and the intellectual sciences that Nasiruddin Tusi, he didn't write. Now when Nasiruddin Tusi was being buried, he was being buried in Qadmain by the grave of Imam Musa al-Qadim. Salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. He was being buried by Imam Musa al-Qadim. Nasiruddin Tusi, he says, that I am being buried in front of my Imam. And when you bury someone, you find their legs are stretched out, their legs are straight. He says, Sharia, it doesn't allow for my legs to be folded when I'm buried. If Sharia, it allowed that, then I would request for me to be buried with my legs folded. But he says there is one solution. He wrote within his wasiyah that if I am going to be buried by my Imam with my legs stretched out, write this ayat upon my grave. وَقَلْبُهُمْ بَاسِطٌ ذِرَاعَيْهِ بِالْوَسِيدِ. And their dog he laid with his forearms stretched by the entrance. That this is the adab of the ulama in the darbar of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. That these are those true ulama. That when it came to the doorsteps of Ahlul Bayt, they would lower themselves at the doorsteps of Ahlul Bayt. You know, a man, he goes to Allama Tabatabai, he insults Allama Tabatabai. They say towards that man that you have insulted such a great alim like Allama Tabatabai. That man, he goes towards Allama. He says, please forgive me. I thought that you were a Martiya Khan. I thought you were somebody who would recite Martiya. I didn't know you were an alim. This is why I insult you. Allama Tabatabai, he says, how I wish I would recite Martiyas for my master, Sayyid al-Shuhada. He says, all of the academic work I do does not compare towards that poetry for Hussein. Why is this philosophy there? You know, when you conceptualize concepts, the impact, it only goes so far. But you find it is the connection of the hearts which changes society. The moment you can touch the heart of an individual, then you can change the state of society. Now it stated these individuals, for 309 years they're within the cave. The Quran, it says, قَالَ قَائِلٌ مِّنْهُمْ. One of them, he says, كَمْ لَبِثْتُمْ. That how long do you think we've been in here? Another one, he replies by saying, لَبِثْنَا يَوْمًا أَوْ بَعْدَ يَوْمٍ. Either we've been here a day or a part of a day. In reality, 309 years have passed. The Quran, it shows a lesson that no matter how long your life is, it will always feel short towards you, because within your fitra and your nature, you are desiring baqa and eternity. You know, if you ask many of our elders within this room, they'll reply by saying that, you know, it only feels like 5-6 years ago we were in our homes in Pakistan or Hyderabad or Lucknow or wherever you may be from. You find that time, it didn't go by like that, but the reality is this is the nature of time. You know, it's stated that when Malakul Maut goes towards Nabi Nuh, he speaks towards Malakul Maut. He says, "O Malakul Maut, that do you give me permission that I can walk to that tree which is by me?" Malakul Maut says, "O Nabi Nuh, when I'm commanded to take a soul, I take it in the state that it is in. But since you are the hujjat of Allah, you are Allah's prophet, I give you permission." So at that point, Nabi Nuh, he walks towards that tree. Malakul Maut says, "Oh Nuh, how did you find your life?" You know, Nuh, according to the traditions of Ahlul Bayt, lived 2,500 years. Nabi Nuh replies by saying, "My life was as short as this walk which I just made to the tree near me." At that point, Malakul Maut says, "Oh Nabi Nuh, in Akhirul Zaman, there will be a group of people that they live only 70 or 80 years. At that point, Nabi Nuh says, 70 or 80 years, that's it? He says, if my life was that short, I would spend my life in one sajda towards Allah, in one prostration towards Allah. Malakul Maut says, "Oh Nabi Nuh, they'll have time for everything, but they won't have time for that sajda and that ibadat which you desire, O Nuh." You find that this is the reality of life. When Ashabul Kahf, they say, "Labitna yawman aw ba'da yawman," that 309 years. But to them, it felt either a day or a part of a day. You know, the tradition, it states that when they were leaving, they spoke to each other. They said, "Let us go and get food from the town." And they said, "Ayyuhal azka ta'aman." Let us get that food which is the purest. The Quran, it goes to show that lesson, that when you go and gain your rizq and your sustenance, you try to gain the purest of sources. You know, when they were leaving, the Raqim, the inscription was at the door. That inscription, it wouldn't move. So the hadith of Ahlul Bayt, they state, at that point, one of them says, "Let us pray towards Allah, and we'll ask through the wasila of a moment that it was difficult for us to obey Allah, but yet we obeyed Allah in that moment." So one of them, he goes up. He says, "Oh Allah, there was a time in my life that there was a farm which I had, and there was a worker upon the farm. That worker, he left, but I was not able to give the wage towards that worker. And with that excess money, I bought one cow. That cow made its way towards the entire farm after a number of years, and through that, I gained a great amount of sustenance. After that, I found that worker. I said to him, 'Oh man, I did not pay you, I didn't give you your haqq.' That worker says, 'A number of years have passed, you are forgiven.' He wouldn't take the money, but I forced him to take the money. Oh Allah, I asked through the right of that moment The hadith, it says the stone, it moved by the length of 1/3 away from the door. Fear out of what was about to happen. So I said, oh lady, I asked for forgiveness. You can have the rations and you don't need to come into my home. Oh Allah, I asked through the right of that moment. It stated the stone, it moves once again. The third person, he says, oh Allah, there was a time in my life my parents had asked me for water. When I brought that water towards them, they had fallen asleep. So all night I stood with that water by their side. I didn't have anyone to tend towards my business. Because of that, I went into a great amount of loss. Oh Allah, I asked through the haqq of that moment. It stated the stone, it moves. These individuals, they go towards the town. Now after 309 years, you can imagine how different their language would be. You can imagine how different their clothing would be. He goes to a bread maker. He gets bread for him. As he gets bread from him, he gives him a coin. The man looks at the coin. He says, where did you get this coin from? He says, I got it from the town which I was in. He says, no, this coin is 300 years old. He says to him that who is the ruler? He replies by saying, Daqyanus is the ruler. The man says, Daqyanus, he passed away hundreds of years ago. You find at that point, news, it spreads to such an extent. The king of that time, who was a Muwahidun, he said that these are godly individuals that let us close the cave. They return back towards the cave. The people, they begin to discuss with each other, what should we do with them? You find the Quran, it speaks. One of them, he says, قَالَ, let us build a bunyanan. Let us build an edifice and a structure over them. But then after that, the Quran, it says, وَقَالَ الَّذِينَ غَلَبُوا عَلَىٰ أَمْرِهِمْ لَا نَتَّخِذَنَّ عَلَيْهِمْ مَسْجِدًا. He says that the one who had a control of the matter, the one who had the final decision, he said, let us build a masjid over them. You find this verse is one of the decisive proofs that when you have a masjid, when you have the shrines of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, the permission to pray in that area is something which is proved Quranically via this verse. You know, it's stated that within the time period of Ayatollah Mohsin al-Hakim, Shah Faisal, he invited Mohsin al-Hakim to go towards Hajj and to engage in a gathering with him. So Shah Faisal, he sends his plane towards Mohsin al-Hakim. Mohsin al-Hakim, he says, I won't get upon that plane. That plane is a plane which was sent from usurped money. So Mohsin al-Hakim, he takes his own plane over there. When he goes over there to the gathering of Shah Faisal, there was a Wahhabi scholar by the name of Abdullah bin Baz, who was the mufti of that time. Now, Abdullah bin Baz was an individual who was blind. As he's going around the table, he's saying, Salaam alaikum, Salaam alaikum, Salaam alaikum. He skips over Mohsin al-Hakim. Shah Faisal, he says, why did you skip over my guest? Abdullah bin Baz says he is a kafir because he is Shi'i. He says, why are the Shi'i disbelievers? Because they don't take the Quran literally, is what Abdullah bin Baz replies, that they believe in the ta'wil of the Quran. At that point, Mohsin al-Hakim, he says that if we are not to take the ta'wil of the Quran, that if we can only take the Quran literally, you will be the first person at loss. Why? Because this individual was blind. In Ayatollah Mohsin al-Hakim, he recited that verse which says, Man kana fi hadihil a'ma fahuwa fil akhirati a'ma. The one who is blind within this world will be blind within the hereafter. He says, oh man, then you will be blind in the akhirah as well if we take the Quran literally. It's stated, and one of the students of Mohsin al-Hakim is narrating this. It's stated that Mohsin al-Hakim, he gets into a discussion with Shah Faisal. Shah Faisal, he says, oh Mohsin al-Hakim, it is the 20th century. That how long will your people continue to kiss the gold upon the shrines, to worship the gold, to worship these structures? At that point, Ayatollah Mohsin al-Hakim, he says, I did the wasila of Babul Hawaij Aba Fadl Abbas. He says that if I answered him intellectually, he wouldn't understand because he wasn't an intellectual human being. So I said, oh Allah, allow me to give him an answer that even he will understand. It stated at that point, a man, he brings in the Quran. He says, oh Shah Faisal, this Quran is from hundreds of years ago. Shah Faisal, he begins to kiss that Quran. That Quran had gold upon it. That Quran had silk upon it. At that point, Ayatollah Mohsin al-Hakim, he stands up, he yells, bid'ah. Everyone is shocked in the gathering. They said, you are a Shia and you are yelling bid'ah. He says, yes, at this moment you are kissing this gold on the Quran. You are kissing the silk upon the Quran. Shah Faisal says, I wasn't kissing the gold. I wasn't kissing the silk. I was doing the ta'deem and the respect of the Quran. Mohsin al-Hakim, he says, when we kiss those shrines in Karbala and Najaf, it's not that we are worshipping it, but rather we are doing the ta'deem and the respect of the one who is buried over there. You find this is that reality. And this is that reality which the ulama of the school of Ahlul Bayt, they would show. When you discuss with somebody, you discuss with hikmah, you discuss with wisdom, and you find this is that reality which we see in the incident of Ashabul Kahf, that Allah, He unveils His wisdom towards this incident. And this is that verse why Sayyid al-Shuhada would recite, أَمْ حَسِبْتَ أَنَّ أَصْحَابَ الْكَهْفِ وَالرَّقِيمِ كَانُوا مِنْ آيَاتِنَا عَجَبًا. That when the head of Hussein was on the spear, the head of the Imam would say, do you suppose that the people of the cave and the inscription are from amongst our astonishing signs? At this moment, I am reciting the Quran. You know, yesterday I recited the Musibah of Sham. It stated a point had come within Sham, that the entire allegiance of the people was moving towards the side of Ahlul Bayt. So Yazid, he calls Imam Zainul Abidin. He says, O Zainul Abidin, I am freeing you. The Imam, he says, free us, but with 3 conditions. He says the first condition is all of the tabarrukat, all of those items which you've taken from us, then give us those items back. The Imam, he says the second condition is that the heads of the shuhada, you return those heads towards us. Then he says the third condition is that you give us a house to mourn, for we haven't been able to mourn properly. You find when that house was there, the women of Ahlul Bayt, they would gather in the house. You find all of the items they would return. You know what the first item to return was? The first item was a flag which belonged towards Aba Fadl Abbas. Sayyida Zainab would say, that is the alam of my brother Abbas. All of the women, they would gather in the saya, under the shadow of the flag, and they would cry. You know, it stated after that, a ring was brought. You know which ring that was? This was that ring when Mukhtar, he caught a man. He said, oh man, what is your name? That man, he said, my name is Bajdal. Mukhtar, he says, oh Bajdal, what did you do on the day of Ashura? Bajdal, he says, I saw the body of Hussein. On the body of Hussein was a ring. When I tried to take that ring, it wouldn't come off, so I took my dagger. I cut the finger of Hussein. You find it was that ring which was returned towards Sayyida Zainab. After that, you find 2 earrings were returned. All of the women, they looked towards Rabab, for the one who would wear those earrings was no more. You find after that, all of the heads, they began to return. You find Layla would take the head of Akbar, Kulthum would take the head of Abbas, Farwa would take the head of Qasim. But as all of the heads were returning, there were 2 heads that nobody, they claimed those heads. It was the heads of On and Muhammad. The women of Sham, they began to say, has the mother of these children died? Fidda says the mother hasn't died, but their mother is only mourning for her brother Hussein. Lady Fidda, she says, oh Zainab, oh Sayyida Zainab, why don't you take these heads? Sayyida Zainab, she says, oh Fidda, we are from the household of Ahlul Bayt. When we give sadaqah in the way of Allah, we don't take it back, oh Fidda. After that, you find one head was brought. All of the women, they stand up out of respect. They begin to say, Wa Husayna, Wa Husayna, Wa Ghariba. You find it was the head of Sayyid al-Shuhada. That time it comes when this caravan, it's leaving Sham to go towards Medina. You find as they're leaving Sham, Sayyida Zainab says, oh Sajjad, all of the women are here. But oh Sajjad, the wife of your father Rabab is missing. Imam Zainul Abidin, he says, oh my aunt Zainab, I know where to find her. Him and Sayyida Zainab, they go towards the prison. Within that prison, Rabab was holding on to a grave. She was crying in the way a child cries holding their mother. She was saying, oh Sakina, you are the one who wanted to go towards Medina. Oh Sakina, we are going towards Medina. You find this caravan, it begins to go. A point it comes where Bashir, he says, oh Sajjad, one direction is Medina, the other is Karbala. Imam Zainul Abidin, he says, oh my aunt Zainab, where should we go? Sayyida Zainab says, oh Sajjad, let's go towards Karbala. You know when somebody passes away, two moments are the most difficult. The first is that moment when they pass away. The second is when you go towards their grave for the first time. The day of Arba'een was the second for Sayyida Zainab. As this caravan, it approaches Karbala, it's stated that Jabir bin Abdullah al-Ansari was there. He was there with his servant by the name of Ati al-Ju'fi. He says, oh Atiya, I hear a caravan coming. Is there any men within that caravan? Ati al-Ju'fi says, there is one old man whose hair has become white. He walks with an asa, his back is bent. Jabir, he goes towards that man. He says, oh man, who are you? He says, Ana Ali ibn al-Husayn. Jabir, he begins to cry. He says, oh Zainul Abidin, Ati al-Ju'fi, he says that your hair has become white, your back has become bent, but you were only a young individual, oh Zainul Abidin. Imam Zainul Abidin, he says, oh my uncle Jabir, Asham. He says, oh my uncle Jabir, Asham, Asham, Asham. He says, oh my uncle Jabir, you weren't there when they cut the head of my father. He says, oh Jabir, you weren't there when they took the hijab of my aunts. Oh Jabir, you weren't there when they ripped the earrings of my sister. Oh Jabir, you weren't there when they would take the tips of the arrows. They would poke my aunts with those arrows. He says, oh my uncle Jabir, look at the marks upon my neck. You find after that, they would go towards the bodies of the shuhada. They would go to the grave where all of the companions were there. After that, Sayyida Zainab, she says, oh my nephew Zainul Abidin, where is the grave of my brother Abbas? You find as they're going towards the grave of Abbas, Sayyida Zainab, she stops all of the women. She says, oh women of Ahlul Bayt, tell Abbas everything. Tell Abbas we went to a courtyard. Tell Abbas our hijab was taken. But don't tell Abbas that we love Sakina. You find after that, They go towards the grave of Sayyid al-Shuhada. Sayyida Zainab, she falls upon that grave. She says, oh my brother, forgive me. That why is Sayyida Zainab asking for forgiveness? That Zainab is Ummul Masa'ib. Sayyida Zainab, she says, oh my brother, you gave me one amana. You gave me a trust. I left that trust in the prison. Ala lanatullah ala al-qawm al-zalimeen. Ya Allah, we ask through the right of the musibah of Ahlul Bayt. We ask through the right of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad that wherever the followers of Ahlul Bayt are in difficulty, help them. Ya Allah, we pray for those who are sick and ailing from amongst our communities. Ya Allah, we pray for the strength to follow the footsteps of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. We pray for the intercession of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. I pray for the advancement of this community, for you all to grow together, and for all those who have made these programs possible. I thank my host, especially Dr. Asad Sadiq and his family, for kindly having me. And I pray for their tawfiqat to continue to increase, for Allah to continue to bless him, as well as your own families as well. And we pray for the hastening of the reappearance of the master of our times, Matam Hussein.